Good evening. From Parshas Tributaries and Tributaries of Eden, what we're trying to do is explain how within seemingly a simple verse, understood and maybe glossed over very quickly by people, how much can be contained in just simple words. And I think a great example of that is the beginning of this week's Parsha. It says, Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe lemor, Hashem says to Moshe, saying, and the parsha begins, Daber el b'nei Yisrael. Moshe, I want you to speak to the Jewish people. V'yikchu li terumah. They shall take for me a separation or a portion. Mi'eis kal ish asher yidvenu libo, from each person who their heart motivates them to give. Tikchu es terumasi, you should take my portion. And Rashi focuses on the word li, v'yikchu li terumah, they should take for me. Rashi says, li, for me, means lishmi, for my name's sake. For my sake, really. For the sake of me. Rather than they should take the terumah, this separation of the gold and silver that they're going to donate for the building of the Mishkan, rather than to take it for Hashem, it's l'shem Hashem, for the sake of Hashem. Or more literally, lishmi, for the name of Hashem. And this requires explanation. Because what was wrong with the original literal understanding of the verse that Hashem says they should take for me a terumah, meaning that I'm expecting from each person, based on how generous they are, they should give back to me what I've given to them. That's a pretty simple reading of the verse. Why do we need to add another word? The vayikchu li means for my name's sake. Furthermore, Rashi on the word terumah, and when you hear the word terumah, what do you think of?
The portion you give to the Kohen.
The portion you give to the Kohen. So Rashi wants to clarify what the word terumah is. So Rashi says terumah means hafrasha, a separation. Yafrishu li mimamonam nedava, that the Jewish people should separate from their money to make a donation to Hashem. What's Rashi trying to answer? What's the problem with the word terumah? What might I have misunderstood from the Torah saying yikchu li terumah, they should take a separation from me? So most of the commentaries explain, Rashi, that the word terumah can sometimes mean like a gift, like whereby a Kohen, you give him terumah, so you are giving a gift. So here, it would be inappropriate to say that we're to give a gift to Hashem, because it all belongs to Hashem. And therefore, it's not a gift, but it's a separation. The problem is, the Torah does seem to suggest that this is coming from people who are generous of heart, which does make it seem like Hashem is giving the Jewish people the merit as if they are somehow giving a gift to Hashem. So, going back to the original part of the pasuk, which is v'yikchu li terumah, they should take for me a separation. And Rashi said that li doesn't mean for me, but it means for my name's sake, for my sake. What was bothering Rashi? So here the commentaries explain, and I think this is a good example of where we will sometimes gloss over and not look at a word so closely. But what's the translation of the word v'yikchu? They should take. Li means for me, terumah, a separation. What should the word be instead of v'yikchu? Instead of they should take for me a separation, they should give. V'yitnu li terumah, they should give to me a separation. Or, it could have said they should take for themselves a separation. Because to take is always to take for yourself. You can't take v'yikchu li for the sake of Hashem. So, say the commentaries, because Rashi has this problem with the language that the verse seems to say they should take for me. It should either say they should give for me or they should take for themselves. And therefore Rashi explains that it means they should take for themselves they should pull towards themselves something for the name of Hashem. They're not taking for Hashem because they would give to Hashem. Rather, they're taking towards themselves, they're taking hold of a portion which is for the sake of Hashem, which means that there's a special act of going to your money and designating and lifting it up and saying, this should be for the sake of Hashem. And not just the act of giving, but actually separating and dedicating and designating that certain parts of the money should be given to Hashem. And therefore, by the Torah saying, V'yikchu li, according to Rashi, there is this concept of not just giving a donation, but of declaring a certain money to be associated with that donation, or in this case, declaring on this gold and silver and blue wool and purple wool and olive oil, whatever else they were doing for the sake of the Beis Hamikdash. That's the simple way to understand this verse. However, Rabbeinu Bachye quotes a very interesting midrash that seems to take this verse completely out of context. I'll quote to you the midrash as cited by Rabbeinu Bachye. V'yikchu li terumah. And we said, what should the word have been? V'yitnu li terumah. They should give to me a separation. V'yikchu sounds like they're taking. So says the medrash, mi'achar shenasati lachem torasi. Shekasuv ba ki lekach tov nasati lachem Torasi al ta'azovu. That Hashem has given the Jewish people a lekach tov. A lekach tov is a good acquisition. The Torah, therefore, is called a lekicha, something taken. And therefore, Hashem says to the Jewish people, V'yikchu li terumah, the reason why the Torah uses the word v'yikchu, they should take, is because you have already taken through the receiving of the Torah. Now, this sounds very difficult, because what does the fact that the Jewish people have acquired the Torah have to do with the act of donating gold and silver to the building of the Mishkan? However, let's finish the medrash of Rabbeinu Bachye and we'll see. Mashal lishnei sochrim. You know what this can be compared to? Two merchants. One of them had silk, and the other one sold pepper. It's interesting because in the ancient days, the Silk Road and the pepper trade, those were the big trade. The spice. Right, all the spices, really. But so one merchant has silk, and the other one has pepper. Now each one is happy. The problem is the one who has silk would like some pepper, and the one who has pepper would like some silk. So the one who has the silk gives some of his pepper to the one who has the silk, to the one who has the pepper. The one with the silk gives some of his silk to the one who has the pepper. They trade. Now they both have what? They both have less than they had. They each have both, but they've lost. And therefore, most trading isn't called a lekach tov, says the Medrash. But when we have the Torah, if I know Parshas Bereshis, and you know Parshas Noach, and we trade, I'll give you some of my Bereshis if you give me some of my Noach. Now, we both have both. Says the Medrash, that's why the Torah is referred to as lekach tov nasati lechem, I've given you a good acquisition. Okay, so that's a very beautiful Medrash in terms of trying to bring out to us the greatness of the fact that we have a Torah, and that its trade, kitov sachra mikol schar, its marketability is higher than anything else. But again, how is that related to the building of the Mishkan? The Medrash continues. There was a story about a man who was on a boat with many merchants. And they said to him, kind sir, where is your merchandise. So he says to them, my merchandise? My merchandise is much greater than your merchandise. So they were very curious. So they sent out their spies, they sent out a search party to search his room and the storehouses for any merchandise that were on this boat to back up this man's claims that he has the greatest merchandise of all. And of course they found nothing. They began to mock him. They said, what do you think you're doing on this merchant's boat with no merchandise? Of course the boat is attacked by pirates and the everything that was on the boat was looted. They came ashore. Somehow, I guess they must have escaped with their lives. They come ashore, and they had nothing to wear, nothing to eat, and nothing to drink. And they all go to the Beis Medrash and wait to see who will help them. When in come all the people of the town, and they notice this one man who they were mocking the entire time, and everyone falls at his feet, and they say, "Great Rabbi, welcome to our community. We're so glad that you're here." And they listen to his story, and they provide him with food, and with clothing, and with drink. So they said to him, would you please talk to these people and ask them to help us out as well? And he said to them, you see, my merchandise is greater than your merchandise. And that's why all the other merchandise is not referred to as lakach tov. But the merchandise, which is the Torah, the trade, which is the Torah, that's referred to as lakach tov, a good acquisition. And I'll ask once again. It's a beautiful medrash about the greatness of the Torah. But what does it have to do with the building of the Mishkan? And so, in order to resolve some of these questions, we're all familiar with a famous debate. What prompted the instructions to build the Mishkan? So it's very clear. There's a Rashi in Parshas Kisisa, right after the incident of the Egel. There it says, on page 492, if you want to follow in, says, Vayitain al Moshe. This is referring to Hashem giving Moshe the luchos. Says Rashi, Ein mukdam u'mu'uchar b'Torah. This is one of the examples where we see that the chronological order isn't necessarily the case when it comes to the Torah. The Torah may sometimes, not always, we're allowed to assume some amount of chronology, but sometimes the Torah may go out of sequence in terms of chronology. Says Rashi, Ma'aseh ha'egel, kodem l'tzivoy melechas ha'mishkan yamim rabim haya. The story of the golden calf happened way before the instructions to build the Mishkan. How do I know this? Because the 17th of Tammuz is when the Jewish people worshipped the golden calf and were punished. One of the punishments was that the luchos broke. And on Yom Kippur, which would be 120 days later, that would be 80 days later, Nisratza HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael, Hashem was appeased to the Jewish people. And the day after Yom Kippur, they begin to build the Mishkan, and it's put up on the 1st of Nisan. Or to put it into more simple, just straightforward chronology, the Jewish people leave Mitzrayim in the month of Nisan, on Pesach. 50 days later, in the month of Sivan, they receive the Torah for the first time. They hear the word of Hashem at Har Sinai. The next month, 40 days later, they sin with the golden calf. 80 days after that, Hashem forgives the Jewish people, and he says, "Vayomer Hashem salachti," or at least a similar language to that, and then that becomes Yom Kippur. The day after Yom Kippur is when they start to build the Mishkan, and that process would continue for almost 6 months until the 1st of Nisan, when the Mishkan is finally put up. So you have, between the giving of the Torah, you have 40 days until the golden calf, and then 80 days after that, they begin to build the Mishkan. Says Rashi, Ein mukdam umuchar b'Torah, because the Torah is not going according to chronological order, because our Parsha, Parshas Terumah, and next week's Parsha, Parshas Tetzaveh, and for that matter, some of Kisisa, should not be where it is. The next thing that should be written in the Torah right after Parshas Yisro, the next portion written in the Torah, should be the story of the golden calf. So why did the Torah change the order? Why is our Parsha where it is? Because since the Jewish people sinned with the golden calf, Hashem responded by giving them a process of atonement, by allowing them to take that energy which they used to serve Hashem, to serve the golden calf, to allow that generosity of heart which they used to give all the gold towards the creation of the golden calf. Hashem gave the Jewish people the opportunity to fix that by making those donations, to giving that service to the holy temple, in this case, the Mishkan. Meaning, and what if there had been no golden calf? Then there might not have been a Mishkan. And then what would have been? According to some, Hashem's presence could have rested directly on the Jewish people. As it says in this week's Parsha, "Va'asu li mikdash, v'shachanti besochem," they shall make for me a sanctuary and I will rest within them. It should have said, I will rest within it. But it says, "V'shachanti besochem," I will rest within them, because the real resting place of Hashem is supposed to be within each of us. We're supposed to make ourselves a vehicle for the presence of Hashem, for the awareness of God's existence in the world. But because we failed, so instead, Hashem, so to speak, had to have his private chambers. So we had to have a Mishkan where the presence of Hashem would rest upon the Mishkan. Therefore, the Mishkan is a direct result of the golden calf. And the Mishkan is a fixing of the golden calf. And therefore, say some of the commentaries, Hashem sandwiched the sin of the golden calf between the instructions to build the Mishkan and the actual building of the Mishkan, in order to close off and to seal away and to remove the judgment against the Jewish people for the sin of the golden calf. That is all, according to the approach of Rashi. However, the Ramban differs. And this is a good thing to try to remember, is that generally speaking, the Ramban is the most against settling for Ein Mukdam Umu'uchar B'Torah, saying, well, the Torah is out of chronological order. The Ramban feels very strongly that there needs to be very extreme reasons for why one would settle on otherwise we would rather that the Torah go in chronological order. Rather, says the Ramban, the instructions for the giving of the Mishkan, those were given before the sin of the golden calf. After Mamad Har Sinai, after the Jewish people experienced this vision of Hashem descending upon the mountain, Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai, now this was to be carried on. the presence of Hashem within the world through the Mishkan. Maybe some things changed once the Jewish people sinned with the golden calf. Then maybe the Mishkan took on another role, which is to be an atonement for the sin of the golden calf. But the Ramban insists that the Torah is in chronological order. So now listen to this, because it comes out just beautifully. Rashi learns, as we just explained, that the sin of the golden calf came first. And then came the Mishkan to atone. That's why Rashi explains, V'yikchu li, they should take for me, lishmi, for my sake. And all the commentaries ask, every mitzvah is supposed to be done for the sake of Hashem. And the answer is really simple, because here, there's an extra reason why it has to be done for the sake of Hashem. Because the Jewish people took their gold and gave it towards the golden calf. So that dedication, that selflessness, that generosity which they showed for the evil purpose, as much as they're supposed to give the gold and silver and copper and blue wool and purple wool for the sake of the Mishkan, in order that a Mishkan should be built, the most important thing isn't so much the giving, as they're showing that same generosity, that same willingness to give, would be given for the sake of Hashem. More important than the giving here is the sake of Hashem. And that's why Rashi says, V'yikchu li, you should take for me. You should take for me, lishmi, for my name's sake. That if you don't give this for the right reason, you've missed the whole point. If someone gives tzedakah, and they don't give tzedakah for the right reason, they've still given tzedakah. If someone is pressured into it because all his friends are giving, and so he has to give as well. If someone was had their arm twisted to make a mishaberach and give a donation. So even though they don't really want to give, but the mitzvah of tzedakah counts. In fact, we know by the mitzvah of tzedakah, even if money falls out of your pocket accidentally and is found by someone poor, you get reward for tzedakah. And this is derived, of course, from one of the 613 mitzvahs in the Torah, which is the mitzvah of shikha, where if someone's working their field and harvesting and they forget some of the bundles, so those are given to the poor, even though I didn't do it on purpose, I forgot it, I performed that mitzvah by not going back and taking it for myself. In fact, if you want to try a riddle on someone, ask them what's the only mitzvah that you can perform without knowing that you are performing it. And the answer is, now, there's many mitzvahs which you can perform without knowing you're performing them. But this is the only mitzvah that you can only perform if you don't know that you're performing. And that's the mitzvah, that if you forgot a bundle in the field, you can't go back and get it. So therefore, by the mitzvah of tzedakah, even if you don't have the right intention, you get a reward. The Gemara tells us that even if someone makes a condition on their tzedakah, and they say, Hashem, I'm giving this tzedakah so that so-and-so should be healthy, that the Gemara says that that's also considered an act of tzedakah, even though you're making demands to God. But not here. Not by the Mishkan. Because here there's something more. They're not just giving a donation to Hashem. They are undoing their act of generosity, if we can call it that. Their act of giving for the golden calf. And they need to at least have as much interest and desire and knowledge of what they're doing as they did then. So again, Rashi, who gives his explanation of li, lishmi, for my namesake. You should make a separation, Rashi says, from the money. Why does Rashi have to say from your money if you're giving gold and silver and copper? Because Rashi is trying to allude to the fact that Rashi is of the opinion that this whole parsha is in order to correct the sin of the golden calf. While Rabbeinu Bachye, who generally speaking follows mostly the Ramban, so Rabbeinu Bachye wants to tell us, no, the building of the Mishkan, at least at this point, was not did not have anything to do with the golden calf. The building of the Mishkan is associated with a continuation of the giving of the Torah. And therefore, the Yikchu li Terumah, you should know that the building of the Mishkan is part of the process of completing the acquisition of the Lekach Tov, which is the Torah. That's why Rabbi Bachya takes all these midrashim about the greatness of Torah and the knowledge of Torah and how much the Torah, when people trade it, it stays with them, and the knowledge of Torah, you can take it with you and it can't be stolen from you. All these things are about the Torah because the Mishkan was the process by which to continue the giving of the Torah to the Jewish people. Hashem would speak to Moshe through the Mishkan. And therefore, v'yikchu li Terumah means that the Mishkan is a continuation for the giving of the Torah. However, if I may, I'd like to take this to a much deeper place. The Balaturim tells us that the word Terumah, which the Torah uses, v'yikchu li Terumah, that the word Terumah can be read as Mem Torah, the 40 days in which the Torah was given. And it's an interesting remez, and perhaps we'll get back to it to try to explain why that is, that the word Terumah is associated with the giving of the Torah. But I'd like to share with you an insight from the Me'or Einayim, who was the Rebbe of Chernobyl, one of the first of the generations of the Hasidic masters, who some refer to as one of the primary sources, the Kli Rishon of the Hasidic Svarim, one of the highest of the high. And he asks the question we asked before, which was, why does Rashi say, "V'yikchu li," they should take for my sake? Rashi says, "Lishmi," for my name's sake. So he asks the question we asked before, that all the mitzvahs need to be done for the sake of Hashem. They should be done lishma. Why is this different than the other mitzvahs? So he explains this concept, and I'll try to bring it down to our level. There are different ways of phrasing this question, and there's different ways of stating the answer to this question. But let's put it in simple terms. Why did Hashem create the world? So one of the explanations which we've given is because Ein Melech B'lo Am. The king must have a people. And Hashem wanted that it shouldn't just be angels who are perfect in every way, but God wanted human beings who struggle, who sin, who fall, who fail. Hashem wants those frail, weak human beings to make for Him a dwelling place in this world. If an angel says, "God, what do you want from me?" that's not a big deal. But when a human being says, "Nasa v'nishma," whatever you say, that's what I'm going to do. When a human being says, "I want that I should be the channel and the medium and the means by which the world should know of God's existence," that person makes a space within this world for God. That is the purpose of creation. And that's a gift given only to the Jewish people. In fact, originally, it was not supposed to be just the Jewish people. But the Gemara tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu davened that Hashem should only rest His presence upon the Jewish people. That's why in the ancient times, there were some Gentile prophets as well. But after that time, it's only been, prophecy has remained within the Jewish people, because Moshe Rabbeinu prayed that Hashem should only give prophecy to the Jewish people. But it's not just prophecy. Even today, the presence of Hashem is still to be found amongst the Jewish people. We are the symbol of Hashem's creating the world. We are the vehicle by which monotheism exists in the world, and we are the ones who represent God's presence in the world. But it's not complete. It's not complete. There is a blemish within that awareness of God. There is a separation. And I'd like to share with you the exact point of separation. Hashem, the primary name of Hashem is the name Yud, followed by Hey, followed by Vav, followed by Hey. The Yud is the highest realm. That's a world that's so beyond us that we cannot even begin to fathom it. The Hey is the world underneath it. The Vav of Hashem's name is the world above ours. And then the final Hey is the world, contains the world which we live in. Or, as you may have heard these terms before, the Yud is associated with the realm of Atzilus, of emanation. A very high realm beyond our comprehension. The first Hey of Hashem's name is associated with the realm of Beria, which is the place wherein is sourced the souls of the Jewish people. That's a realm that on some level we can connect to because our soul is from that place. Then the next world is the world of Yetzirah, of formation. That's the world of the angels. That's the realm above ours. But then the final Hey of Hashem's name, that's the world of Asiyah, the world of action, the place of physicality. That's the world wherein we are. And when we do not bring down Hashem's presence into our world, because in those upper realms, the awareness of Hashem is clear. The angels, some of them are on the level where they say, Maloch ha'aretz kavodo, the entire world is filled with His presence. Some are higher and they say, Baruch kavod Hashem imkomo, from wherever God is, because they understand that God is beyond even a realm such as that. But in our world, we can sometimes create this illusion as if God is not there. And that's the separation that we cause between the Hey of Hashem's name and the Vav of Hashem's name. Because we allow this world, which is the Hey, to be separated, to remove God's presence from our minds in this world. So says the Me'or Einayim, v'yikchu li terumah. The word terumah is tarum Hey. Take the Hey of Hashem's name and lift it up. Bring God's presence in this world to awareness. And this entire world will be elevated. Terumah, tarum Hey. Lift up the Hey. Let it reconnect with those upper worlds. And then Hashem's name, Yud K, Vav K, will be complete. Which it isn't today. The Yud K, Vav K is not whatever this means. There's a separation. And that's due to the result of our failure to properly make this world a place of awareness of Hashem. Our sages tell us, Mishenichnas Adar marbim b'simcha. When the month of Adar enters, we increase our joy. Why? Why should it be about the month? Nothing happened on Rosh Chodesh Adar. There was a decree that the Jews should be killed on the 13th of Adar. We beat them, so we celebrate on the 14th. In Shushan, they fought on the 14th, they celebrate on the 15th. But nothing happened on the 1st of Adar. It's not like in Nisan. In Nisan, even though Pesach is the 15th, but on Rosh Chodesh, they were told, HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem, this is the new month, they were given instructions, and the Mishkan was put up for the first time permanently on the 1st of Nisan, and then it was inaugurated each of those days by each one of the tribes. The celebration of the month actually begins on Rosh Chodesh, but in Adar, nothing happened on Rosh Chodesh. Why do we say Mishenichnas Adar? It should be Mishenichnas Purim, Marbim B'Simcha. So he quotes the Gemara that says that the Jewish people, when they ascended from Bavel for the second to rebuild the second temple, to build the second temple, to rebuild the temple, they brought with them something special out of Babylon. the names of the months. Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, those are not in the original Torah, in the original Lashon Kodesh of the Torah. These names of the months are not found. But once the Jewish people were in Babylon, they brought with them the name of the months. Says the Moreh Naim, what do? We started adopting? Are we going to take January, February and make them part of our religion? Those are, especially since, actually it turns out, some of these names of the months are actually names of idols. The answer is that our sages understood that these names of the months belong to us. There was some force in the world that had taken these holy names of the months and misused them and turned them towards idol worship. And when the Jewish people went to Babylon, they knew, why did the Jews go to exile? In order to collect the holy sparks from the nations of the world. So one form of recollecting that was to reclaim the names of the months. So he says the name of the month is Adar, which can be broken into Aleph and Dar. Aleph is always a reference to Hashem. Aleph means the chief. Hashem, who is the chief of the world, but it's also the Aleph because Hashem is one. Dar means dwells. The month of Adar is the time which we are most able to create a presence and a dwelling place for Hashem. And it is interesting that the 7 days of inauguration, where they prepared for the Mishkan, were the last 7 days in Adar, so that the 8th day was the 1st of Nisan. That was when they fully put it up. But they had to start the inauguration to bring down the presence of Hashem to the Mishkan in the month of Adar. Because Adar is Aleph Dar. Now the Gemara tells us, everyone knows this, that when Haman was casting his lots, when it fell in Adar, he was super excited. Because this is the month of the death of Moshe Rabbeinu. And the Gemara adds, from the narrator's perspective, but Haman didn't know that Moshe was also born on the 7th of Adar. This is difficult. If Haman knows his Jewish trivia, and he knows that Moshe, it doesn't say in the Torah it was the 7th of Adar, you have to sort of figure it out. But we know Moshe passed away on the 7th of Adar. Don't you think he could have figured out that's the same day Moshe was born, right? Because he was born, if he was born on the 7th of Adar, then if you count 3 months, which would be when he was put into the water, that would make 3 months later the 6th of Sivan or the 7th of Sivan, which is the day that the Torah was given. So Moshe was put into the water. There's ways to calculate how beautifully it fits the fact that Moshe was born on the 7th of Adar. So if Haman knows these things, he should know this too. So the Moreh Naim explains, and this is something which we all have to appreciate. The Zohar tells us that Moshe, after his passing, did not leave our world. Rather, Moshe Rabbeinu, his presence or his soul, remains connected to each and every Jew in every generation. Moshe Rabbeinu is the concept of the attribute of Das. Moshe Rabbeinu represents knowledge of the Torah. He became the messenger to pass that on. And because he was the messenger of Hashem to bring Torah to the Jewish people, there's a piece of Moshe Rabbeinu in every one of us. We know that there are neshamos klolios and neshamos pratios. There are larger souls that are inclusive souls, and there's very specific souls. For example, a parent will include the souls of all his children, or all their children. a teacher will, on some level, connect to the souls of all their students. Every time a teacher gets new students that enter the classroom, these are new people whose souls are touching, not just a transmission of words from mind to mind, but there's actually a connection on the level of soul between teachers and students. The greatest teacher, we don't even call him Moshe, we say Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe our teacher. Moshe Rabbeinu remains connected to every single Jew. In fact, Moshe Rabbeinu is more connected to us after his passing. When his neshama is no longer within the body in this world, he then can, so to speak, connect to our neshamas and continue through the Torah which we study, be a messenger of Hashem to give us the Torah. As we say, Moshe kibbel Torah misinai, u'misar li Yoshua. Moshe is constantly the source by which, and that's why we say, Zichru Torahs Moshe Avdi, remember the Torah of Moshe my servant, is what Malachi writes, because we are continuing, this is on some level Torah's Moshe, even though none of it was created by Moshe. But Moshe remains our teacher forever and ever. The Morinayim says, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos tells us, Ma'od, ma'od, havesh fal ruach. Very much, you should be humble of spirit. And he asks, is it really possible for us to be humble of spirit? Very much, ma'od, ma'od. Halavai, we don't get insulted for someone who says something and they don't even mean to insult us. We're already at tzaddik. To suggest that we should be exceptionally, extremely humble, isn't that a lot to ask from our sages? And so says the Morinayim, no. Because if you would appreciate that there is a Moshe Rabbeinu within each of us, and of Moshe it says that he was anav ma'od, mikal adam, he uses that word ma'od. So if you get in touch with that piece of Moshe Rabbeinu which is within you, you can learn to be as humble, at least on our level, as Moshe Rabbeinu. If you say to yourself, Moshe Rabbeinu was the messenger of Hashem to bring the Torah down to the Jewish people, and yet people insulted him, and he responded so kindly and so gently. Moshe Rabbeinu was insulted by these people, and he fought for them with his own life and said, if you take them, take me. That selflessness that Moshe Rabbeinu showed, that his complete giving of himself for the sake of the Jewish people, that's within you. You can be like Moshe Rabbeinu on that level, and that's what he's saying. Ma'od ma'od havesh fal ruach. If you find that Moshe within you, you too can be humble. And here the Morinayim says something, a beautiful, beautiful pshat. You know the Torah ends, towards the end it says, V'lo yada ish es kvuraso. And nobody knew where Moshe Rabbeinu was buried. Says the Morinayim, because you can look all over the world to try to find Moshe Rabbeinu buried, but he's inside of you. Moshe Rabbeinu is buried, is hidden, is concealed within every one of us. Every Jew has a piece of Moshe Rabbeinu, which allows you the ability to know the Torah, which allows you the ability to love the Torah, which allows you the ability to transmit the Torah to others. That's a power and a strength that's given to us through our connection of the soul with Moshe Rabbeinu. In the same way that all teachers will tell you, I've never met one that can't say this, that they had one teacher who they can look back to and say, that's an amazing teacher that I want to connect to. There is a process of transmission. Every person has to have a teacher, even if it depends what they teach, but everyone has a teacher. You have to have that, and this takes us back all the way to Moshe Rabbeinu. Haman is also an ish. Lasos kirtzon ish va'ish. Haman misunderstood. He said the month of Adar is the worst month for the Jewish people because that's when Moshe died. He knew Moshe was born, but it doesn't matter that Moshe was born that month. Moshe Rabbeinu died in the month of Adar. But he didn't understand that Moshe Rabbeinu is born today. Moshe Rabbeinu lives on in the souls of the Jewish people, who he affected through his teaching, not just through his teaching, but the attributes that he exemplified, especially the attribute of humility. Moshe Rabbeinu continues on, and so the month of Adar became the day when each one of us can be like the Moshe Rabbeinu. And what does Moshe Rabbeinu represent? Represents das, pure knowledge of God. You know what pure knowledge of God is? Pure knowledge of God is the recognition that that we need to make an awareness, a place for God to be in this world. That's why Hashem says to Moshe, you're going to build a Mishkan. Moshe himself is the one who puts up the Mishkan. Because Moshe teaches the Jewish people how they can create a presence of God within ourselves. And amazingly, our sages tell us, you know what the best way to make place for God within yourself? Humility. The less of you that there is within you, the more place there is within you for God. If you're filling up and you're taking the space, if in your mind the most important words that are passing are me and I, those are very big words. And God doesn't like cramped spaces. But if we have a little bit less of me and I, and a little bit more about what can I do, about what I can give, about Nadivas Lev, generosity of heart, then we have the power to give a Terumah, to elevate this world, by making this place a place for God. The Gemara tells us that there's two Adars. There's an Adar Rishon and an Adar Sheni. Why is it specifically this month that's doubled? You could say it's the last month, that's the one. But why didn't they give it a new name? Nobody could come up with another name that they had to call one Adar 1 and Adar 2. Every 2 or 3 years when we have an extra month, we should have a new name. So he quotes the Gemara in Megillah that tells us, Ein ben Adar Rishon la'Adar Sheni. The only difference between the first Adar and the second Adar is in terms of two mitzvahs. Mikra Megillah, the reading of the Megillah must be done in number 2. Umatanas Lavyonim, the giving gifts to the poor, must be done in the second Adar. Otherwise, says the Mishnah, both Adars are the same. Now, we don't rule like this Mishnah because we move everything to the second Adar. But at least the language of the Mishnah is that the only difference between Adar Rishon and Adar Sheni, the first Adar and the second Adar, is the reading of the Megillah and the gifts to the poor. So says the Ma'or Einayim, every person here is born twice. The first time is when you emerge from the womb as a human being. At that point, you are functional in all areas but one. And that's das. Knowledge. And it doesn't mean knowledge in terms of information. You can have 10-year-olds who are brilliant, who can make their way around the Trivial Pursuit board in one turn. But that's not true knowledge. True knowledge is something that we refer to more as a maturity. It's a maturity of mind when the person really understands what's going on. And when either a bar mitzvah or a bas mitzvah happens, at that point, the person has a new level of das, and that's what we call them, a bar das. That's when the person is really born. So even though you can have a child who's brilliant, but that child is not able to make a presence of God in the world because they're not able to understand fully what it means that there is a God. To be able to bring down God into this world, to connect the Vav of Hashem's name, which is associated with the name HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and to connect it to the Hey of Hashem's name, which is associated with the name the Shekhinah, this connection requires us to have a knowledge of God that allows for this connection between the Vav and the Hey. That's what the Beis HaMikdash is. That's what the Holy Temple is. The Holy Temple is a way that God's presence can be in the temple in this world, the temple of the Mishkan representing the letter Vav, and then God's presence being there. The letter Vav is associated with the written Torah. The letter Hey is associated with the oral Torah. Bringing together God's presence in the world is also making the connection between the written Torah and the oral Torah. It says the Moreh Nayim, and you say this every day in the davening, how many ways, how many methods are there to expound upon the Torah in order to come to the proper conclusion within the oral Torah? Rabbi Yishmael says, Bishlosh Esrei Midos HaTorah Nidreshes Behem. The 13 hermeneutic principles by which the Torah can be studied and derived, he says, are the 13 years that it takes someone to mature. Now, why would it be that by girls it's 12? He doesn't say. But he says these 13 hermeneutic principles are associated with deriving, expounding, until you come to the right knowledge. So then we would think that when a person arrives at the age of 13, that they should now have matured and have knowledge, and it should never change. But as we know, especially at the beginning, we fall, we get up, we fall, we get up again. Shiva Yipol Tzadik V'kam, the Tzadik will fall. Shiva Yipol Tzadik V'kam, the Tzadik will fall 7 times and still rise. We, as human beings, are going to make mistakes. And we are going to make serious mistakes. And that's the way it's supposed to be. It's the way it's supposed to be because our world isn't perfect. Even though we see the name Yud Kei Vav Kei, we can't read that name, as we've discussed in the previous weeks. Because we don't have a knowledge of God that's clear enough that allows us to actually express Hashem's name. In the future, when the world will be filled with knowledge of God like the water covers the sea, when that will happen, then we will actually be able to pronounce the name Yud Kei Vav Kei because we will have some level of understanding of what that name means. But until that happens, we fall, we get up, we fall, we get up again, over and over again, and that's important. Because every time you fall, if you pick yourself up, you rise higher than you were before. If we would not fall, if we would just be trying to climb, it would be very difficult for us. But because we fall, we make mistakes, and when we make mistakes, we push ourselves to be better. We put fences around ourselves to protect us. That elevates us and makes us higher. When 2 people are trying to have a relationship, if they just carry on life, if there isn't a struggle, they can't better that relationship. You need to fall in order to rise higher. And he says that's why we have an Adar Rishon. But since Adar represents creating a presence of God in this world, which is our knowledge of God, we can't always get it right the first time. And so that's why we don't celebrate the first Adar. The first Adar represents our attempt to bring God into us and failing miserably. And then we have Adar Sheni. They kept the same name for the month as if to say, try again. You can do this again. Lift yourself up. And this time read the Megillah. Megillah meaning revelation. This time work better on revealing. Matanos le'avyonim, give gifts to the poor. Meaning that you fall into a low place, but you can elevate yourself. Our sages here are trying to explain to us the greatness of the month of Adar, that we can use it to elevate ourselves to a place that's higher than before. And therefore, how appropriate is it when we read Parshas Trumah during the month of Adar? Because the month of Adar is when we're supposed to work Not just on Purim. Purim will come later, but the whole month of Adar is Aleph Dar, is the month when we build a Mishkan within each of us, where it's V'yikchu li, take me. Take me into yourselves. Terumah, lift up the hay. Connect the Vav to the hay. When we do that, we allow ourselves to be elevated to the space, and it could be that this is why on Purim, the custom is, as the Gemara tells us, the halacha is, that one should drink until they lose their mind. Yayin, on some level, is connected to das. The wine comes in, the secret comes out. It confuses our minds because we're meant to fall. We're meant to confuse Arur Haman and Baruch Mordechai. But what we want is to make ourselves a seat, a place for the presence of the Shekhinah. And that's not by looking only at the areas where we failed, but to realize that there's a Moshe Rabbeinu within each of us. That power is there. You can connect to that source of within your neshama and use it to elevate yourself. May we merit that Mishenichnas Adar, as Adar comes in, Marbim B'Simcha, we should increase the joy by recognizing the power and the potential that's within each of us that would allow us to create a presence and a space for Hashem within each one of us. Thank you.